In today's video, we are reacting to the USCSB's new video titled Simultaneous Tragedy, Fire at Evergreen Packing. Make sure you stick around to the end of the video where I assign my percentages of fault on the parties. Let's jump right into it.
During September 2020, the Evergreen Packaging paper mill was undergoing a planned shutdown, during which maintenance work was occurring throughout the facility.
Fun fact, paper mills smell terrible. See, that's not fun at all. Paper mills are surprisingly gross.
In one of the mill's units, a contract company known as Blastco was performing repairs in a vessel called an upflow tower. Another contract company, Rimcor, was working in a different vessel called a downflow tower. The two vessels were connected at the top by a large diameter pipe.
Okay, issue spotting number one. Because these two units are actually connected, the two separate contracting firms need to be in constant communication. They're not working on the other side of the refinery. They're working on one system that's connected. They need to be making sure that they're both doing activities that are safe, not only for themselves, but for the other contracting company as well. And just logistically, that is hard to do because they are two separate companies. It's people who don't know each other. And so then if that's the case, it is the duty of the premises owner to establish, to make sure that there's a line of communication and these contractors are working together. I promise you, they told us that information because there was a lack of communication. You just watch.
By a large diameter pipe. Blastco was tasked with repairing approximately 30 feet of the inside surface of the upflow tower, which was made of a material comprised of fiberglass matting and epoxy vinyl ester resin, otherwise known as fiber reinforced plastic, or FRP. To repair the tower, the contractors would grind away the old damaged material, then apply alternating sheets of new fiberglass with layers of resin. The rate at which the resin hardens depends on several factors, including ambient temperature. The resin hardens faster in warmer temperatures. On the other hand, the resin takes longer to harden in cooler weather. And this is what Blastco workers experienced on the night of September 20th. On the particularly cool night, the resin and fiberglass matting slid down the walls of the upflow tower before the resin could harden. Blastco workers attempted several means of troubleshooting the resin, but were ultimately unsuccessful and continued to struggle. Sometime after 2 a.m. on September 21st, two Blastco workers resorted to using an electric heat gun to warm the resin, causing it to harden faster. The Blastco crew did not communicate to Evergreen or the Rimcor contractors working in the connected tower that they were using the heat gun.
Okay, so a couple of issues came up. First, this resin, it's too cold apparently outside, so they need the resin to be warmer in order for it to do its job. So the first question I have is, why are they doing these repairs in this time of year? It's September. Why couldn't they have done these repairs sometime when it was hotter, maybe in the summertime? Maybe you just got unlucky with the weather. Maybe the weather's really not that big of a deal and it's industry custom where you can heat up the resin pretty much at will or some other method. I just don't have enough information to know if that's an issue yet. If it is industry standard and you can totally just heat up the resin at will, then the second issue is the hot work. Hot work is work that can cause something to catch on fire. Think of using a match or a blowtorch or something that is likely to spark, or you're near a chemical that has a relatively low flash point. And as a broad general rule, this is Refinery Work 101. You do not do hot work in confined spaces. So we see here that the workers are heating up the resin with their heat gun inside of the pipe, the upflow pipe. And of course, we still don't know if they're communicating with the other contracting company in the downflow pipe.
At approximately 5:15 a.m., the heat gun fell into a 5-gallon bucket of the flammable resin. A fire erupted inside the upflow tower. The Blastco workers inside the tower did not have a fire extinguisher or other means to put out the fire. They quickly evacuated. Smoke and flames from the fire traveled rapidly through the connecting pipe to the downflow tower, where 2 Rimcor contractors were working. They were overcome by the smoke and unable to escape. Both workers were fatally injured.
Okay, so let me set the stage for the lawsuit. The 2 individuals who died worked for Wind Corp. The 2 individuals who set fire to the upflow tower worked for Blast Corp. And they were both contractors working at the paper mill. So immediately there's going to be 3 parties involved in this lawsuit. So the representatives for the 2 individuals who died and their estates, their family, in the wrongful death lawsuit are going to sue both Blast Corp and the Evergreen packing facility. Remember, fault is a spectrum, and the jury is going to assign fault based on percentages, and everybody is going to share in that fault. For instance, Blast Corp, they were doing work in a confined space. They were doing hot work in a confined space. And also they weren't communicating with another contracting firm that was in the downflow tower. The fire packaging, or the Evergreen packaging facility, was allowing 2 contractors to work on a single unit without telling them or forcing them to communicate. Ultimately, it's the premises owner's liability and responsibility to make sure that things get done safely. And even the company that employed the 2 individuals who died might share some faults as well, because they were not communicating with their fellow contractor, with Blast Corp, who was working in the upflow unit. So now that we know who the parties are, let's see if we get any more information to see how much fault to assign to each party.
Identified 4 safety issues that led to the incident at Evergreen Packaging: hot work safety, pre-job planning, confined space safety, and combustible materials of vessel construction.
Hot work safety is a major safety issue that we identified during our investigation. We found that Blastco workers did not recognize the heat gun as an ignition source. As a result, proper hot work permitting and effective safety precautions were not implemented.
The CSB found that the heat gun could produce temperatures in excess of the resin's flash point.
So the workers didn't even realize that they were performing hot work. I'm sorry I get frustrated. That is an issue.
Therefore, it should have been recognized as an ignition source, and its use should have been considered hot work under both Evergreen's and Blastco's definitions. But Blastco workers did not recognize the use of the heat gun as a hot work hazard because it did not produce a flame or spark, and they did not inform Evergreen or Rimcor of its use.
Okay, so Blast Corp never even told Evergreen or the other contracting firm about the gun because they didn't think it was hot work because it didn't produce a flame. Mistakes like these are all the more reason to have a line of communication with the other entities, because they were mistaken. If somebody from the other firm or contractor would have seen that, they might have said, hey, your heat gun is hot work. So let's take a step back and, not do that while people are working in confined spaces.
Had Blastco recognized the use of the heat gun as hot work, their own procedures would not have allowed its use in a confined space in the presence of flammable resin.
It is important for companies to train their workers on different types of hot work. Some forms of hot work, like heat guns, don't produce sparks or open flames. Blastco should update its policies and training to include the use of non-flame and non-spark producing tools that can serve as ignition sources as hot work.
Another safety issue identified by the CSB was a lack of pre-job planning. Blastco workers were not sufficiently prepared to apply resin during cold weather and did not have a plan to safely troubleshoot the problem of the resin hardening too slowly. For example, the CSB found that Blastco had 2 drum heating bands available at the time of the incident that could have safely warmed the resin in a drum outside the upflow tower, negating the need for the heat gun. But because these drum heating bands were not identified during pre-job planning, as equipment workers might need, they were not staged for use, and Blastco workers could not locate them.
Okay, so clearly Blastcore is not a well-run company. The employees didn't even know of the existence of the heating drums that were apparently just right outside. And also, the individual from the CSB told us that Blastcore did not have any sort of training that considered using a heat gun as hot work. So everybody was just clearly underprepared.
As a result, workers resorted to using a heat gun instead, which ultimately ignited the resin inside the upflow tower.
Hot work should be avoided if a safer alternative is available. Effective pre-job planning could have prevented this incident. Blastco could have used a troubleshooting guide to address the cold weather, or may have been able to delay the work until ambient temperatures were warmer.
A third safety issue identified by the CSB was confined space safety. The upflow and downflow towers at Evergreen Packaging were permit-required confined spaces. OSHA requires that a confined space entry be terminated whenever, among other conditions, a condition that is not allowed under the entry permit arises in or near the permit space. Blastco's confined space policy contained a similar requirement. The heat gun, an ignition source, constituted a condition that was not allowed under the entry permit. But Blastco did not recognize the ignition hazard. Therefore, Blastco did not terminate its confined space entry when the heat gun was introduced into the space. And the CSB found that Evergreen, Blastco, and Rimcor treated the upflow and downflow towers as separate and independent confined spaces, even though the towers were connected by a crossover pipe. Interviews with each contracting company revealed both companies separately conducted safety analyses for the vessel in which they were completing work and were only minimally aware of the work being done in the other vessel.
That is just unacceptable. And y'all listen, obviously Blastcore needs to pay, but don't forget that Evergreen allowed these people on their premises. Clearly, they were not qualified to do this job or to do it well. So don't forget that.
But the CSB found that since the two towers constituted a single confined space and Blastco's and Rimcor's entries were simultaneous, the two maintenance tasks constituted simultaneous operations, or SIMOPs.
Otherwise known as common sense.
SIMOPs can be defined as operations occurring close together in time and place, which might interfere or clash with one another, increasing the risks of the activities or introducing new risks altogether. But Evergreen did not have a SIMOPs program in place at the time of the incident, which would have facilitated coordination between the two contractors who were performing work close together in time and place.
Exactly. Evergreen let this simultaneous operation happen and did not facilitate any communication between the two contractors. Okay, I need to go before I get too upset. I'm going to cite percentages of fault. 51% of the fault on Evergreen Packaging, 47% of the fault on Blastcore, and 2% of the fault on Windcore. Ultimately, I'm a big believer that the premises owner has a duty to hire well-qualified, trained people that don't put other people on their premises at risk. Additionally, the premises owner needs to provide the contractors that they hire with an environment where they can successfully do their job and facilitate communication and other resources so that can happen. Evergreen Packaging clearly did not do that. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that Blastcore wasn't a bunch of dumb motherfuckers. I mean, they literally just didn't even think that they were conducting hot work, and more so than just that, they didn't have any training on heat guns. They had other reasonable methods available, such as heating the resin outside, but nobody did that or pre-planned for that. So it's clearly a disaster all around, and yes, 2% of fault on Windcore for not communicating with Blastcore, but ultimately I think that is more Evergreen's responsibility to facilitate that communication because it is their facility. Let me know in the comments what y'all think. Assign your percentages of fault below. Talk to you later. Bye.
He's a catastrophic injury attorney who accidentally became a YouTuber. Attorney Tom.